Welcome to Heart with Keisha B, the podcast that focuses on the journey of grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances. Whether you're dealing with loss or life challenges, this is a podcast that you don't want to miss. I am your host, Keisha B. So take a deep breath, open your mind and your soul, and sit back as we embark on this journey together. Are you seeking support from someone who can help you rediscover your purpose, reconnect with your heart, and rebuild your life while honoring the legacy of the child that you love so deeply? Hello, I'm Keisha B Brown, therapist, grief coach, and host of Heart to Heart with Keisha B. I'm a mother who understands your pain. I have the heart to guide you as we move forward through the grief and healing journey. Welcome to Heart with Keisha B. This is a space that focuses on grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances. If you are a new listener, welcome. If you are a returning listener, thank you for your continued support. And if you are ready to engage in raw, uncomfortable conversations, you are in the right place. And as you know, on this podcast, I always bring people who would not only share their story, but they will always uplift you, inspire you, as well as to let you know that you're not alone in your journey. So as always, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests. But our topic for today is breaking free from the past, Tori's story. So Tori, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Keisha?
I'm doing well, thank you. And as I know, it's noon here. It's 9 o'clock there. So tell me, how is the day going so far for you this morning?
Well, pretty good. I try to start my day every day, unfortunately, with coffee, but that's okay. A little coffee. I journal, I meditate. It takes, intentional action each day to stay centered, to stay balanced, to stay on track.
Yes. And like you say, sometimes we need that coffee, right? I call it an addiction. I get it. But some mornings I can't live without my coffee, right?
Every morning.
That peace I need. It's that peace I need sometimes just to be able to balance myself, right? And that may sound weird, but I think everybody has different ways. As long as it's healthy in some way that helps you get through that moment, then you do whatever that may take, right?
Absolutely.
And I know as we move forward in this episode today, you're going to talk to us about things that you've had to do to just make it day to day.
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of that we'll share. Tips and tools.
Tips and tools. That's always helpful. So Tori, as we begin to start this episode, one of the questions I want to ask you is, Tori, I know that you've been through a lot in your life, right? And I know from growing up in a very challenging environment to experiencing profound issues as an adult. Can you take us back to your childhood and share how those early experiences have shaped the person that you are today, as well as the work that you're continuing to do to help heal others?
Yeah. So to go back to my origin story, I was definitely brought up in a challenging environment. My mom struggled with addiction. I was actually conceived by her when she was in rehab for heroin. And luckily she got off of that, but it didn't end there, as most, addiction stories do. It ended up being a lifetime issue for her. So I grew up with a lot of, disconnect, some emotional, physical, mental, different types of abuse, not intentional. My mom, I know she had a ton of her own trauma and she did the best she could. She made me very strong, but those early experiences created a lot of codependency. I was what they call a needless child, meaning I just took care of everyone else. And that's the only way I actually knew how to connect with other people, was to take care of them. I was the mom. I was the caregiver. I took care of a lot of things I shouldn't have at the time. Like even by the time I was 9, I was taking care of my little brother pretty exclusively early on. And then things shifted and he went to live with his grandmother, thank goodness. But, there was a lot of pain and struggle and trauma, and how that affected me was I became highly like a codependent rescuer. I didn't really trust people and I didn't know how to connect with them without just taking care of them.
Right.
And I didn't even know until I got literally in my 30s that I had needs in relationship. I didn't even understand what reciprocity looked like. Mm-hmm. So those were the things that shaped my adult life, was being the caregiver, being with people who, and also my mom being an addict herself tended to attract men who also had addiction problems. And my
Right.
real biological father was in the Vietnam War, and he had a lot of, PTSD. So he was also an alcoholic. So every person, including my older sister ahead of me, had problems with addiction. So I'm the first person in my family to not experience addiction.
Tori, more often than not, I realize that when I do these episodes that there's always a moment in someone's story that I find that I can resonate with what they're saying. And so what does that say? What that says is that I know if I can, that there's a listener that can as well. So there was a part that you just mentioned that it took me back to my childhood of growing up in a home with a mother who was an addict. And even though I was supposed to be the kid, I felt myself many times taking on the role as a parent, right? Worrying about if she was going to be okay.
Yes.
Many days not going to school. My family didn't understand why I didn't go to school, but I didn't go to school because I was worried about my mom. Like, if I come home, is she going to be here? If I come home, is she going to be alive? And so unfortunately, it's just something that a child should not have to deal with. But what I know, and I'm sure what you're going to share later, is the strength that it gave us to face different challenges throughout life and but let's also say this, it also puts us in survival mode many times as well.
Absolutely. Coming out of survival mode has been like a lifetime challenge for me. And what's fascinating too is the nervous system gets wired for that, like being in survival mode. So it's not even just like understanding it logically, it's also allowing the body to recognize I'm safe, it's okay, and I have to take care of everything around me. And how it shows up for a lot of people, if for your listeners, sometimes it shows up as control, because control is really just fear in high heels. It feels, it looks nice, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the word that you just said so rings true for me: control, right? Control for me, because, and I'll even take it back to losing both of my parents. Like prior to the more recent loss of my life, that was a hard hit for me as a kid who didn't have parents. And so I remember always thinking, well, I couldn't control that. So now everything I can control, I'm going to.
I will.
I'm going to control how you treat me. I'm going to control who's in and out of my life. And if I have to walk away first, that allows me to protect myself. So, I mean, that word control just rings so true in my life. I know that for sure. Even today in my adult life, it's still there.
Yes. It's like
trauma response.
It is. It's a trauma response. And I love, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks a lot about the brain after trauma is kind of like one of those annoying fire alarm, like the smoke detectors you have in your house that you boil some water and it goes off. That's kind of how our brain can get. So it's like, it takes so much like body awareness, self-awareness to really catch ourselves of like, okay, I'm afraid, I'm pushing someone away. We seek and want love so badly, but when we've had difficult emotional, physical, mental traumas, and, we use that word and a lot of people get scared and think it's something serious. Like you and I have definitely been through what we call, capital T trauma.
Right.
But even having a parent who's like emotionally neglectful or has mental health issues and they're not there for you, that creates this lack of safety in your body and your mind. And that's what I always want to remind people of, is like trauma is any lack of safety you experienced, anything that made you feel like you weren't safe and you couldn't connect with someone or you couldn't be yourself. And so like really allowing people to redefine trauma for themselves and see how it shows up in their life so that they can, turn that pain into their purpose, the wounds into the wisdom, all the things that you and I have done. And now we help other people.
Right. And being mindful of, this is probably a whole nother episode for me, but being mindful of how that unresolved trauma can show up later in parenting when you're parenting your own kids, because you're trying so hard not to be like those who raised you, but ultimately not realizing, almost like a Polaroid picture, that picture is still there in your mind and it may show up while you're parenting someone else or in a relationship, and sometimes just not being mindful of the residual effects that it can have on your life, is hard to accept, but it does happen.
Yeah. Some people, I always say we go one of two ways. We either do the exact same thing that was done to us, or we actually try to overcompensate and do the complete opposite. And that can be just as harmful. Like for me, having no one really look out for me and feeling like I had no support, I became highly codependent in taking care of my brother. I wanted to make sure he never wanted for anything. And I over cared for him to where I don't think it was helpful. It was almost like enabling in a way. And luckily I realized it early enough, and he's great and wonderful human being. But if I hadn't caught myself, I can't imagine what I would have created. And it's kind of the same thing with parenting. We do it out of love, and we don't want our children to ever suffer, or the people we love to suffer. But trauma, unresolved emotional stuff, it shows up in our body and our relationships the most. And so if you're having physical things or you're having relationship issues, always looking at that past and how am I dragging the baggage of my past and how's it coloring my present?
I like that. I like that. So you brought up the word codependency a little bit in this episode because it's real, right? Can you sort of share with our audience, what are some signs and symptoms of codependency? And the reason I ask this is because sometimes somebody may say, but I'm just loving them, right? I'm just giving. Didn't have, my mom was not the best of mothers. She was emotionally not tapped into us. And so I just want to love my brother. That's what a big sister's supposed to do. Or I'm going to love my daughter or my son because their dad's not here. So let's talk about what does codependency really look like and what is the negative aspects of codependency?
Yeah. So codependency, I love to make it very simple. It's the feeling that if you're okay, then I'm okay. It's over attunement with someone else. It's making their problems your problems. If they're not okay, you're not okay. There's no sense of being grounded in the self. It's like worrying about someone more almost than you worry about yourself. And codependency shows up in 3 ways, and it's a triangle, basically. We go through it. There's the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. And so we go around this loop. And what does that mean? The victim is the person who's being helped. And that might be your child. That might be your partner, whoever it is. That's the person. The rescuer is the one who's taking care of. And the persecutor is the one that's blaming. And we go around. And what will happen is you'll help someone. You'll get resentful because now you see them as the victim. They're not doing anything. I keep telling them what to do. I keep taking care of everything. They keep making the same mistakes. Then you get upset at them. That now you're the persecutor. Then you come into the victim. And it just starts all over again. And so we go through these dynamics of overhelping, overgiving, getting resentful. Then that person gets mad at us for overhelping. And then they blame us, we blame them. And we just start the cycle over and over again. So that's kind of how you can recognize that codependency is, am I so enmeshed in someone's life? And it could be anyone. I did it with my friends. I did it with my family. No one was my ex-husband and I were not too, we were different. My codependency showed up different with him. That's another thing. As in some relationships, primarily I'd show up as the rescuer, meaning I'd want to take care of everyone. I came in with my superwoman cape and said, I'm capable, I'm reliable, and I'll take care of you. And if you need healing, I'm going to fix you too. And what's so funny is that people actually will get into that dynamic and we think we're helping, but we're actually taking away their power and their autonomy, and they will resent us for that too. So it's funny that balance of giving love, and I see true love is I'm holding you in a positive way. I'm letting you see your own power, your own light, your own abilities. Codependency really says, if you have any problem, I need to fix it because I don't trust that you'll do it. I will do it better than you. And then the flip side of that is the victimhood, which is life is happening to me. I have no control. I need someone to rescue me. I need someone to take care of me. It shows up in beliefs of I'm no good with money. I should let my husband take care of it. It's very subtle, and it's us giving away our power. And so that's how we end up in those dynamics with people.
I love how you were able to, even though, some people are going to listen to this versus watching it. I love how you was able to still give a visual, right? Because we all know what a triangle is, and we all know that it has 3 points. And so just the idea that you gave that visual, I'm sure that somebody may be able to listen to just that moment and begin to reflect. And so my hope is that as they reflect upon that, they then ask themselves, am I one of the 3, or have I been all 3 at some point of my life, or am I in that role now? And we'll continue to listen to this episode to learn what do they need to do to remove themselves from part of that triangle.
Yeah. And so let's talk about, that's actually a great place to start too, is if I find that I'm on the triangle, if I'm the codependent rescuer, then my job is to actually become the coach and the person who lifts people up through my words and not my actions. It's giving responsibility back to someone. So a great example I always give people is I would go in and want to solve all their problems for them. And so it was saying if someone's complaining to me, because we all have that person in our life who just complains all the time, we give them great advice and they never take it. And then we get upset because I've spent 10 hours on the phone with you talking about this guy and he's still doing the same thing. Right. And that's a form of codependency too. It's very subtle, but it's letting them know like, okay, that sounds really hard. What are you going to do about it? Placing the power back on them. So that's how we get out of the rescuer, is we guide, we ask the questions, we reflect, we hold space for them, but we don't fix it for them. If you're the persecutor, that's blame. And so it's like, where am I blaming people for the things that are happening in my life? And how can I take that responsibility? And then if I'm in the victim mode, then that means, again, like, where am I feeling like life is happening to me and I don't have any agency or authority or power? And where am I giving my power to other people? And I always say, when you're in victim mode, the keys to your happiness, your health, your wealth, they are in someone else's pocket. And so we want to take those back.
Right. I like it. Even when you said keys, right? What I just envision, and this may be crazy, but Tori, what I just envision is like being in a car with a reckless driver. Right? Like, you're like, I don't feel like driving today. I'm gonna just give you the keys to my car because I trust that you're going to get me to the next destination. And this person is driving really crazy and you're sitting in the passenger side, putting your foot on the brake, but you really ain't got your control because you putting your foot on what you believe is the brake is really just the floor. There's no brake there for you to control it. So like I hear you saying is keep the keys for yourself, right? Drive yourself to that next destination because you have control on how you get there and how safe you're going to be while getting there, even though it can be scary.
Absolutely. And our whole goal in life is to get to interdependence with people, which is healthy connection. It's I love you and I care about you and I give and I receive and you give and you receive, and we don't need each other to be whole. We're two whole people working on ourselves, and we're not perfect. There's a lot of stuff out there about like, you've got to be healed to be loved. That's not true. We're traumatized in relationship and we are healed in relationship. So a healthy relationship can really help you heal your stuff. But it means you walk in with that self-awareness of, yes, I'm not going to give you the keys to my happiness and then be mad that you didn't make it happen. Right.
So as we dive a little bit more into Tori's life, I always say I'm being a little bit nosy, right? I want to know a little bit more about Tori and her life. I know that you may have encountered some losses in your life. Do you mind sharing with us the losses that you encountered and the impact that it had on your life from then and now?
Absolutely. Yeah. Loss is something that I know Keisha and I've talked about. We don't talk about it enough. And I think it leaves us really alone in this, because I have experienced grief that cracks your soul open. And I always say we choose what breaks us down and what breaks us open. And grief can really break you open, but it is not a pretty process. And it's something I don't think we talk about or support each other enough in. But basically, when I graduated with my master's degree, I decided to leave my corporate, or I was trying to figure out what to do next. I was kind of at a big crossroads. I was a very successful HR manager and I loved my job. I had a great boss, but I knew it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I already had my clinical psychology degree. I'd kind of hit out there, and I went back and I was going to school and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And then my sister suddenly overdosed. And so I just, one day she was gone. It's like I woke up and she was gone. And that really shook me, because it's like she didn't even make it to 40 years old. And how it shaped me was definitely like, okay, I can't waste time. Like, we don't have time. Like, in that moment, it was my invitation to live. And that was her gift of the loss, was like, okay, I'm going to live for my sister. I'm going to travel. I'm going to do all these things that I've always said I'm going to do. And I just got stuck in the, what should I do to be successful? Because I didn't come from much. And there was a lot of financial struggle. And there was times we were on welfare. And I really wanted this life. And I checked all the boxes and I wasn't happy. And so I started my practice. And then, gosh, like not even a year later, my mom dies. Same thing. Get a phone call the next day. She's gone. And I'll never forget that, she called me the day she died and I didn't pick up the phone because I was busy. And so it's like those things of what matters to you. Like, my grandmother died, and then my dog died. My brother almost died. He got very sick. He was very close to dying. I lost my best friend. Like, we had a falling out. in building my business, I spent all of my money. I blew through my 401k, my savings. Like, I ended up, because of all the stress of all the death and the loss and building my business on top of all that, I also ended up getting diagnosed with something called Addison's disease, which is where your fight or flight system, your adrenal, your HPA axis, which is your little adrenal glands that give you energy. Mine just quit working. And so they told me I'd be on medication for the rest of my life. And I decided to go down the functional medicine path and heal that, and got that back to functioning, which is a miracle in itself. And then as that, like, just as all those deaths start, like every year for 11 years, I had some major loss, like either a family member, a friend, a good friend of ours, like, was on suicide watch. Like, we had to call 911 to, like, make sure that he was okay. Like, there's just so much trauma in those 11 years. And then COVID happened. And then my marriage fell apart in 2021. And that was, my ex-husband is a great person. We were no longer aligned, I think, is ultimately what happened. Right. But there just wasn't one thing I didn't lose in that 11 years from both. Oh, my father died. I forgot about that. Sorry. It's hard to remember sometimes, but basically over those 11 years, I lost almost everything in my life. Today, there's only 2 or 3 people that I even know that I knew back then. Everyone else is gone, to kind of give you an example. Yeah. So rebuilding yourself from the ashes of grief and not knowing even how you're going to get up in the morning, I couldn't breathe some days. And I know that people who've experienced grief know that. And it just felt like no matter what I did or how hard I tried, life just knocked me back down and pulled the rug out from under me again. There was no ground under my feet. Right. And that is when I really, like, luckily I am very spiritual. I'm very connected to something bigger. I have a few psychology degrees. So I really had to lean into everything I had learned before all of that happened and just take it day by day, moment by moment, feel my grief. I would actually schedule time with myself to go sit and cry because I knew I couldn't hold all that baggage in my body. And I'm so grateful I had the tools, but sometimes I don't know how I got through it when I look back. But it was just like that, one step at a time, one day at a time, and really trying to rebuild my trust in myself, my trust in life, and my trust that I could completely reinvent myself. And I kept telling myself, if I had survived my childhood, then I wouldn't let this take me out too.
Right. I understand that, and again, you said something else that I can resonate with, when I lost my son, and I will say, for those that have heard me say it and have not heard me say it, that right there was the hardest damn death I ever faced. Right. But I'm going to add something to that in a few. But as it was the hardest death I had faced, of course, I wanted to lie in bed, all the things that a grieving person, but definitely a grieving mother, wanted to do. Many days I couldn't even really tap into how I was feeling. But what I knew was what I was feeling was not what I always wanted to feel. And so I said, what are you going to do different? And I remember sharing with some friends, I said, I am just ready to get in my car and drive as far as I can go and never return. And I remember the statement they made to me via text. Well, we love you, but there's nothing else we can do. You need to go get therapy. And I'm thinking, therapy? I mean, I'm a therapist, but I'm not going to go talk to nobody. I'm not doing that, right? Doesn't mean that I'm above it. None of the things, because I will always tell someone, if you need help, go seek additional services, whatever that may be, as long as it's healthy for you. But Tori, I vowed to myself, I'm going to take this moment and I'm going to grieve, whatever that looks like, right? And what that looked like for me was that I consciously made a decision to take 4 months out of my life. Nobody else knew what I was doing. I separated myself from everybody. And I took 4 months out of my life, and I began to write my autobiography. And what that allowed for me to do was, it allowed for me to pour all the things I had not healed from: my mother's death, my father's death, all the other sense of trauma that I had been through over the course after losing my mom. Because this is what I realized as well, Tori. If I did not make space for my new situation, I don't know where that would have taken me. So I had to deal with all the other things because I had to make space in my life to focus on my reality, which was the loss of my son. And so being able to open up that space, being able to heal from all the other stuff, allowed for me to finally sit with myself and say, girl, this is real, right? Like, it's the hardest death you ever faced. You can't lay in the bed. You have to find a way to begin turning your sorrow into service. And that's what allowed for me to really begin to find purpose in my son's death. And that's where I was going to go next, Tori, was that as it was the hardest death I've ever faced, it was one of the best deaths I've ever faced. And I know right now a listener may be saying, what in the world is this lady talking about? Right? Because that doesn't even make sense. But the way that it makes sense is that he gave me purpose to realize I must heal from all my other stuff. And I must realize that even though this is the hardest death, I still have purpose in my life and I got to figure it out. And that has gave me my purpose to figure out what I needed to do to move forward. Because the reality of it is grief is going to always be here because I'm going to always love and think about my loved ones, but I can heal and I feel good healing, you know? And so when you were talking about finding purpose and finding time to just grieve, that allowed me to think back on grieving through my son's death. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that for me.
But that's so powerful, like to take that time to take your story, to turn it into healing, catharsis, you know, and purpose, because that's ultimately the point of all of this is like, you know, I believe in soul contracts, and that was you and your son's soul contract. He came in to open your heart, give you such tremendous love and pride and all the things you had for him. And then when it was time for him to go home, it was an incredibly painful loss, but it catalyzed something in you that will help millions of people. And that is his legacy for you. And I love the saying that when grief comes into the station, it brings all of its cars. So when we have this one grief that shows up, we think it's just that one, but it's all the grief that we've not processed that comes in. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is one of the famous psychologists around grief, I've worked with her protege, David, and he always said that grief is like a book on a shelf. It will not go anywhere. It's just waiting for you to read it. And that sat with me a lot, that our job is to feel it in order to heal it. And then we can heal it. We can transform it. You will not always be in that place. And I think that's the thing that I needed to hear the most when I was in grief, is that I wasn't always going to feel that low, that it was going to pass. But grief is an active process. There's a huge myth that time heals all wounds. That's not true. We all know that auntie who's 77 years old, she still hates her sister for stealing her boyfriend when they were 15. or something, you know what I mean? There's like, we know that person who's held on to the pain, and we see how it shows up in their life. So I want you to think of that person in your life right now who's not felt it, who's not healed it. Let that be your reminder. This is why I want to find that support. Like Keisha was saying, heal those wounds and turn it into my wisdom, turn it into something greater. Allow it to break our heart open to receive more love. Because I'm not the same person. And I know Keisha's not either. No. Like, I had a lot of guards. I had a lot of fear around love. And now I am so much more open. I am so much more vulnerable. I want to say the thing because I know what it's like to not be able to say it, to not have that person there the next day and just be that be your one dream, that you could say one more thing to them, or you could give them one more hug.
Right. You know, you touch so many things right there, you know, and what I share with people as I talk with them and help them and support them through grief is that, again, as you and I said before, grief is something that's going to be there forever. Right. But it doesn't have to take full control of your life. Are you going to cry? Absolutely. Right. And it's not just on an anniversary date. It can happen anytime. And what I share with people is birthdays. Right. And I share with people, but why shouldn't you cry? Didn't you love your loved one? Why should you stop thinking about your loved one? So if that brings up a tear, wonderful. It just shows the connection that you have with your loved one. If you smile, if you laugh, why shouldn't you? Right. It doesn't mean that you can't laugh when you're grieving. It just means that is the connection that you have with your loved one, because they should have left a good memory with you, and they may have left a bad memory too, but it is part of the process. And I think that is the misconception that people have, that they think, well, if I'm still grieving, I'm not okay. You are okay, unless you're staying stuck there. That's the difference. Unless you're staying stuck there and you can't find any sense of hope, then that's where the problem lies.
Exactly. Yeah, grief will always be there and it will always feel like a bit of a weight in your heart, but you just get stronger and you expand the
Mm-hmm.
capacity for your to hold both sides. The sadness of I love them and I miss them and I wish they were here, and I'm so lucky that I got to experience life with them,
Yes.
and I still have a life to live. As long as I have breath, I have to have some kind of hope, some type of reason to be here. And that's exactly what you said. That's purpose. And in the yogic
Yes.
philosophy, we call it dharma. And it's the first goal of life is, what am I
Yes.
here to contribute?
Tori, you've been giving us a lot of gems. I want to assume, right? I sometimes I know what assuming can do, but I want to assume that this is what I want to assume that this is what you do on a day-to-day basis, not just for yourself, right? Because you are still healing every single day. But how do you take your expertise of life experiences and help other individuals grow in their life?
Yeah, it's so true. Like I've spent the last 13 years having my own practice and helping people. And it's a combination of my own process called the reclamation process, where, we reconnect, we rewire the brain, like we work on healing mind, body, and soul, really. And so I've studied, the last 26 years, 3 psychology degrees, multiple different types of spirituality, just to understand, what does it look like from an energetic perspective? What does it look like from a body perspective? I'm a yoga teacher. There isn't much I haven't done. I have quite the list of certifications. And it's because I truly believe with healing, we've got to kind of throw everything at it. And what does that mean? That means I've got to work with my mind, I've got to work with my body, and I've got to work with my soul. And that looks different for everybody. But
Yes.
there's something that we call top-down processing versus bottom-up. And top-down is where I start with the mind and I go down. And then bottom-up is starting with the body and going up to the mind. And I really believe that healing starts with, it can start with therapy. It can start with yoga. It can start with taking a walk and getting outside. It's really figuring out, where are you struggling the most? Are you struggling most in your physical body? Are you feeling a lot? Grief can bring physical pain. It can bring body aches. It can bring, like I said, like not feeling like you can breathe. Get out into nature, take a walk, let sun get on your face. Start with that, what we call bottom up processing. If your mind is heavy, like, Keisha was saying, you can't get out of bed, you're stuck in this grief, and then, find a counselor or coach, someone a pastor, anyone that you trust, that you can really start to unload that mentally. But
Right.
yeah, it's finding the healing process for yourself. And remember that you've got to put enough into it to where it creates this tipping point. I've done every kind of healing you could possibly imagine. I've gone to acupuncture, I've gone to yoga, I've gone to energy healers, I've gone to therapists, I've gone to functional medicine doctors, naturopathic doctors. Like, I did not get here by accident. And I know that can take a lot of investment. You can do it with a lot less. I've read hundreds of books, like I am just so committed to my own healing, because I want to live a beautiful life, and I want to be of service to others. And I know, for any of you out there who want to help others, if you're not helping yourself and you're not working on you, you have no business helping others. Correct. So, and that's not a bad thing. It's an honest thing. We've got to own our stuff. And me walking through my journey and walking through my fire has given me so much more experiential knowledge to help people, because I'm not talking about something I've read in a book. I'm saying, like, I've been in those places and I know, and I have the map to help you crawl out. But then I customize it to that person to make sure it's aligned. I have hundreds of tips and tools and tricks to help people get from where they are to where they want to be.
Right. Right. And you and I know that's not an easy task. Right. It's not an not easy in so many ways, because here's the why. At least this is what I think. Even though sometimes we may not be as comfortable in our skin because of all the things that we may have experienced and or have been through, sometimes we become complacent and thinking, this is just it. This is what my family did. This is all I saw. So this is really who I'm probably meant to be. I mean, I want to feel better, but I don't think there's any way out, because this is what we always have done. Have you ever in your practice, have you ever had a client that has been there? And if so, how have you helped that person navigate through that mindset?
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing you said right there, is it's a mindset. It's very typical. Like, I want everyone to know that if you've ever thought, this is just who I am, this is how my family is, trust me, I come from a long line of addicts. That was a very easy choice for me to make. And then when I was about 17, I was like drinking and I was partying a little bit. And I remember my mom and my sister had both been to jail. And I remember when I turned 18, that is actually what stuck in my mind was, if I kind of keep going down this path, I'm probably going to do that too. Like I'm just, I don't know where, somehow the universe had a different plan for me and I did that. But I always remind people that like, we are patterned and programmed by the way we were nurtured. And all those things get in our head. Because trust me, I did not think that I could be who I am today at all. Like my highest goal was that maybe I would meet a nice man and maybe we would not live in an apartment, if I was lucky, like God willing, maybe I would make it off of welfare and we'd be able to pay our bills and have food. Like that was my highest goal as a child. and to know that like I could have my own business and I've owned 2 homes and I live in California now. These are all dreams that I never in a million years thought I could have. So I always remind people our psychology is learned and it can be unlearned. And then even our physical ability, a lot of people forget there's something called epigenetics. I have the genes for things like addiction, but my actions pull the trigger. So even if I have the genes for obesity, I have to engage in those behaviors to bring that onto me. I knew early that addiction was so rampant in my family that probably wasn't the best idea for me. And so I had to make a conscious decision at like 20 something to quit drinking completely. And it felt right for me and it's not right for everyone, but like, I knew I was going to have to make some radical decisions to be different. And that's what scares us because we don't know who we're going to be if we're not. And there's actually a really subconscious block here that a lot of people don't recognize, as we feel that if we're changing the dynamic of the family, that we're distancing ourselves and we'll lose our connection to them if we're not like them. And I get that because I even got that when I was younger, like when I would get good grades in school and stuff, I wasn't promoted for it. It wasn't like, oh, that's so amazing that Tori's smart and she's doing these things. It was like, you think you're better than us. You think you're going to do all these things. You're too big for your britches. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of strength to step out of the family dynamics because it feels threatening to them and your connection. Right. And so it's reminding yourself that you won't lose your connection with your family. But what you risk by staying the same is losing the connection with yourself and who you're meant to be and the life that you were meant to live.
Yes, so powerful, so powerful. Yesterday I was sharing with someone, I was at my grandson's soccer practice and there was a gentleman whom I had never met, but obviously his daughter and my grandson go to school. And so in the midst of us conversing, he had shared with me that he is living a life of recovery and so is his wife. And so as soon as I heard it, I'm always intrigued to talk to people that are walking the daily struggle of staying clean, right? Because it's not easy. And so I began sharing with him a little bit of my story. And so something you just said reminded me of that. And I was sharing with him that when I was growing up, if any of my siblings are listening right now, they'll learn something they didn't know before. But I remember sneaking alcohol and beer to school because we had a bar downstairs in our home. No one knew it. My peers didn't know it. Nobody knew it, teachers or no one. And so when I went off to college as a freshman, we got to go a day earlier than the rest of the people that were coming in. And so me and some of my friends, we went to this place and it was all you can drink beer. I didn't think anything about it. Within a matter of moments, I was sliding down the wall because I did exactly what they said. Drink all you can drink. And that's what I did because I didn't want it to be a problem. And so fast forward maybe a year or so later, I had a situation, drinking all I can drink. And I woke up the next morning, Tori, and I said, wait a minute, this doesn't even make good sense. All right. I'm having fun, so I think, on Saturday, but I'm waking up on Sunday and I don't feel well. These two things don't correlate for me. Like something doesn't correlate. And so it was that moment, right, that I said, I can no longer drink anymore. But that's not when I realized that it was an issue for me. When I realized it was an issue for me is that as years went on, and I began to get stressed, I thought about alcohol. I wasn't drinking, but I thought about alcohol. So it was at that moment that I realized because of how you are wired, because of your family's genetics, you really have the potential to be an addict if you don't be careful. And so I've had to make conscious decisions over my life to not indulge, not just in illegal substances, but other things like Pepsi. I used to be addicted to Pepsi, and so it's understanding who you are and understanding that you do have the control, but not everybody can easily get to that understanding to know how to control what's trying to control them.
Absolutely. And, the body becomes addicted to those substances as well. We know from the research that children of alcoholics have massive issues with sugar. And I'm one of them. That's something I have to be very, very mindful of because, gosh, I'm lucky that I have some discipline around it, but I could absolutely eat a bag of anything chocolate, you know what I mean? And not even think about it. So I have to do like low sugar chocolate and like really healthy things because I have to my nervous system craves it so much. So I allow some of it, but I'm very conscious about what it is that I'm eating. And the one thing too is like to let people know that when you're shifting out of an old behavior and you're shifting those old neural patterns, it's going to feel the most uncomfortable ever. And that's why most people give up. We know exactly what we should be doing. We know we shouldn't be having 3 glasses of wine or whatever when we come home. We know we should be exercising. We should be eating veggies, but we don't do it because our old familiar habits feel so good to us. And the very things that are the key to our transformation are actually what we resist the most. So just take that moment for your listeners and think about like, what's something I'm doing that I know that I don't really like? And how can I recognize it and just start to like slowly shift away from it? So it's like, if I'm having, if I know I'm not having a healthy relationship with alcohol, the minute you have the awareness, that's when healing starts. That's all it takes. It takes the awareness. And then eventually it's going to take new habits to reform those neural pathways. And that takes time. And so it's really having that grace and self-compassion in it and knowing that like, if you're 1% better every week, just 1%, at the end of the year, you're 50% better than you started the year.
Mm-hmm. And what I did not hear you say, Tori, because I want our listeners to understand this, you didn't say it was going to be easy.
No.
It's not going to be easy. No. But give yourself grace is what I heard. Be patient with the process. Like you say, you're not saying 50% tomorrow. You said 1% that will equal 50% within a year.
Yes. Like such small changes actually help the brain acclimate. The brain perceives any change as a threat. That's what's fascinating, right? Is even if you get up in the morning, because this has all happened to us, like when we start working out, at first you get excited and you're like, yes, I'm going to the gym or I'm taking these walks or I'm running around the block. I'm feeling like so proud of myself. About a week in, your brain starts to say, I think she's trying to kill me. Like we're getting up early, we're losing sleep, we're exerting extra energy, we're not eating as much, we're definitely being killed. So let's sabotage her. How does that show up? It shows up as all your doubts, all your fears, all your resistance. It shows up as, oh, I can't get up this morning. I'm too tired. My baby kept me up last night. It shows up as, oh, I'm just really hungry. I had a stressful day. I just need to eat a whole pizza. It's all these very normal human things. And so it's catching ourselves in those moments. And just like when I started exercising again after all that trauma and health issues, I started with 1 day a week because I knew that there was no part of me that was going to be able to go, because I started weight training because, I'm in my 40s and I wanted to be strong, not skinny anymore, because I know like I want to keep my bones and all those things for you ladies out there. But it was like, I know my brain is going to resist this change so powerfully that I started very slow, very intentionally. And that helped me get to where I am now, which is like, I love to lift weights. I can go 2-3 days a week and lift like heavy weights. And I know for a fact I would not have been able to do that. And it's more of a metaphor for anything you're trying to do or let go of. Make it a small process, take those baby steps, and your brain, your subconscious, your ego, all that stuff will not resist you as much because it doesn't notice the change. When you make big swings for the fence, it says, oh gosh, what is happening? We're not safe. We better put the brakes on here.
Right. Thank you for that, because that may be what I need to do is one day and gradually get to that, because I had started a few months ago, and just like you said, I started making excuses. So first 2-3 days look great. I'm just like you, 40 some, I'm getting older. I mean, I'm fairly decent size, but I am realizing I'm starting to pick up a little bit more weight. It's okay weight, but if I don't get it under control, what is that going to look like later? So thank you for that, giving me permission to just go one day. I'm going to try it. And Tori, I'll get back with you, let you know if it's working for me.
Yes, there's a great book too called Atomic Habits, and that's like I'd already known this from neuroscience, but it kind of goes into like how to do that. But like that's the biggest thing I always say with people is just start as small as you can. Even if you're not happy with your diet and you're really hard on yourself, don't even take away. Be like, I'm going to add one vegetable each day. Like I'm going to eat one green thing every day instead of saying like I can never have pizza or fries or anything that I love again. Like think about what you can add. What can I do? What's 1% better each week? And if you keep stacking those habits, your brain won't even notice. You won't get all those excuses because that's literally how we are wired. We know from the science, no one can keep their New Year's resolution. We all know what we should be doing. It's our own psychology that works against us.
Right. So Tori, you have provided all of us with a bunch of gems. You've provided us a bunch of tools in which we can keep in our tool belt. So as we are at the end of the episode, what is one heart-to-heart message that you would like to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, just that to know that no matter what's happened to you, no matter where you've come from, that you can make small, daily, actionable changes, that you can heal, that you can get closer to who you want to be, and to really focus on your progress over your perfection. Because I think when we think about healing and goals, like we only think about the end result and we don't really celebrate the wins along the way. And it's like, if you went from feeling crappy, let's say, being low, for weeks on end, and you have a couple hours where you feel at peace, you're healing, you're making progress. And so just taking that with you from like my 13 years of working with hundreds of people, but also my lifetime of dealing with incredibly difficult things and getting through that without a single substance, by the way. I never had a glass of wine. I never checked out. I had to hold it all. So everything, your pain will become your power, your wounds will become your wisdom, but it's just your choice of what you do with it.
As a transformational coach, and I think you've summed it up of all the things you'll be able to provide for one. Where would one be able to find you? They was wishing to receive support from you.
Yeah, and I love to connect with people, answer questions, whatever that is. You can find me on Instagram at tori.jenea, which is TORI.JENAE. And similarly, my website is torijenea.com. There's lots of books and things that we can do that help get people started, because I truly am very passionate about healing, and I know it's what I'm here to help people do. And that's that's my life goal, is to make my message, a mess, like my message out of my mess is basically the way I like to say it.
Yes. So as always, audience, we would like to thank you for your continuous support today. And hopefully there's something today that Tori and or myself have stated that will allow you to know that you are not alone, even though we understand that there's moments that you may have felt that way. As you have heard, each and every one of us have something about ourselves that we can change, although it may not be easy. So again, if you're seeking support from someone who can help you rediscover your purpose, reconnect with your heart, and rebuild your life while honoring the legacy of the child that you love so deeply. Again, I am Keisha B. Brown, a grief coach, a therapist, and host of Heart to Heart with Keisha B. I am here to support you, guide you as you move forward. As always, you can find me on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Again, as always, thank you for your continued support. Thank you for tuning into Heart to Heart with Keisha B. Remember, grief may shape our journey, but it doesn't define who we are. Healing is not a straight path, but with every step forward, you're creating space for hope, strength, and new beginnings. If today's episode brought you comfort or clarity, share it with someone who might need it too. Let's continue building this community of compassion and resilience together. Until next time, take care of your heart, your mind, and your soul. Honor your journey and always know that brighter days are ahead. I am Keisha B, and this has been Heart to Heart.